Hey everyone, welcome to Reddit Readout. Today we are checking out People of Reddit. Story 1. I trolled a hacker relentlessly. One of my friends had their Instagram account hacked. The hacker then messaged me, pretending to be my friend, about a link to help him log into his new account. I knew it was a scam, but wanted to play along. I played along until I managed to get his phone number. The real fun started after that. I downloaded some texting apps and spam texted him from 10 different numbers, under the pseudonym of Carnage. I did this so that even if he blocked me on one number, I'd still have a number of ways to troll him. I would say things like, "Answer boy, Carnage is speaking to you and you will be begging for mercy when Carnage is done with you." He called me every swear word he could think of. I knew I got him mad. I then proceeded to spam call him from a Google Voice number, with the no caller ID setting turned on, which prevented him from being able to block me. After enduring this relentless trolling, the hacker disconnected their number and blocked me on Instagram. Story 2. Don't want to pay me for my work? Let me remind you of our contract terms. So back in the day, I worked as a commercial photographer. Most of my clients were great, but a few liked to drag payment out or think they could just not pay me because they were a big company and I was just one guy. I had one assignment where I delivered about 24 images of models with their products. It was a pretty big deal for me. At every step of the way, they expressed their delight with all of the images I delivered. They'd paid me 1/3 up front and after delivering the images, I billed them for the balance. And I waited and waited and waited. Nothing. Every time I called, I got some excuse until they just stopped answering my calls. Then it happened. They published the images and in ways that went beyond what our licensing agreement had covered. So not only had they not paid me for the usage we'd agreed to, they'd used the images in ways that went well beyond what we'd agreed to. They still weren't answering or returning my calls. Okay, they wanna fuck around, they're gonna find out. So one of the things in my standard licensing agreement is a condition that says, licensing is contingent upon payment in full. So by not paying me, all of their usage is considered infringement, not just the usage outside of our agreement terms. One thing I did when setting up my business is establish a good relationship with a lawyer. It helps that my cousin is a lawyer with good friends. So I call my lawyer and detail everything that's gone down. He sends them a letter letting them know we intend to sue for infringement since the images were never licensed, and that the penalty is like $150,000 per image and block their use of the images altogether. I know they got the letter because they called me freaking out. Offering excuses, we were in the process of paying you. It's been 3 months past the due date. Accusing me of poisoning our working relationship. If you wanted a good relationship, you would have stuck by our original agreement and paid me. I ended the call by telling them they needed to deal with my lawyer. They must have consulted with their own lawyer who evidently told them just how fucked they'd be if they went to court over this. In the end, I settled for less than what I asked for in the initial demand, but it was far more than if they'd just paid me and negotiated for the additional usage. Story 3. Me and my GF got my manager fired for being a sexist idiot. Sorry, this is kind of a long one, but I think it's important to get all the context. ATLDR will be at the end. I worked for a building supply company starting in January, and things were going well with the job at first. The pay was not so great but the hours were good and the management did their job. But when one of the managers left, it created a problem. Besides leaving the obvious void in the workplace, one of my other managers was planning on going on a vacation, and she couldn't put it off. So in comes Manager R. The last-minute replacement. Manager R has a few quirks that makes no one like him works with him, to put it mildly. He was a parole officer before working with us, so the only real managing experience he had was managing felons. And it showed. He would treat the lazier workers like his prisoners. Constantly nagging them, constantly up their butt when there was no good reason to be. He said he wanted one of the cashiers fired after being there for not even a week, and wrote another guy up for talking back to him when all he said was his handwriting was perfectly legible. In a very calm, non-aggressive way. Manger R still took that as an insult and wrote him up. The worst part was being his friend, which is what he thought I was. I got the luxury treatment by being allowed to go outside to smoke with him. Only I didn't smoke. And I hate the smell. But it's not like I could say no. And believe me, I wanted to say no with the stuff I heard him say about women. Picture this, a short, skinny, crackhead-looking dude who somehow got to be my manager, talking about women like they were all into him, saying stuff like, yeah, that girl there wants to F me. Now, I am a straight guy, but I can tell you, dude was no looker. And the ramp sexism wasn't doing him any favors. Then at one point, a customer walks in by herself with children and manager R, with the joke of a century, calls her a walking divorce, and that actually gave me an idea. What if she heard him say that? Wouldn't she call the store to file a complaint? She would if she heard him saying that stupid crap about her. But then again, she wouldn't have to. My GF could do that for her. So, she calls in and nothing. Manager R comes out the office and explains that the customer must have misheard him and the head manager was unfortunately buying it. So I had to step in and talk to the head manager and let him know what he had been saying. And he finally believed it. He said there was no way the customer complaint could have been faked with my testimony. And there went one less asshole in the workplace. I hear he works at Subway now, oof. TLDR, manager is a raging sexist, gets fired for it by me and my GF tag team reporting him at the same time. Story 4. You should have been nicer if you were going to cheat off me. In high school, I was a bit like Hermione Granger in the worst way. I was just an awkward kid who understood the material as well as the teacher did. I was that odd kid who read history books during the summer for fun. I'd constantly be raising my hand in class with the answer, looking for validation. That kind of behavior got me picked on quite a bit by a certain group of students in my history class. They'd tease me, mostly behind my back, but they weren't above cheating off me on the tests as they were difficult, and they knew that I knew the answers. Very few of my test scores in this subject were below 100% as history is a passion of mine. Initially, I was flattered, but over the semester I got the sinking feeling of being used as these same kids didn't show me respect in any other way. Our final history exam was a 50-question and multiple-choice test that would be worth 30% of our grade. The stakes couldn't be higher. The teacher wrote the questions to be tricky. On the day of the final, I scanned through the test in a few minutes. I knew the material and felt confident. My peers on either side of my desk were watching to see how I'd answer. Their neighbors were, in turn, discreetly watching them. It seemed as if the entire side of my class was hanging on my answers. I answered the first 3 questions accurately, then I went for the almost correct answer every other time. This resulted in a 54% score. I was careful to let the other kids see my test. Then, when I finished, I waited and stared at the wall with my test still in front of me. The time was running out, and my classmates all began nervously turning in their tests until only a couple of students on the other side of the room remained. With 5 minutes left, I stood up abruptly, crinkled my test into a ball, and threw it into the garbage. I was trying to be dramatic. It worked. You've never heard such a stunned silence. I quickly grabbed a new test from the table. There were a couple still there, missing students. With a shocked smile, the teacher said there's only 5 minutes left. I didn't care. I had spent the period memorizing the correct answers. With no time to spare, I answered the questions in a complete whirlwind. A B C A B D D D A B C C A B B. My friends told me later that everyone was staring. I didn't have the bandwidth to see it. With 10 seconds left, I turned in my test. The kids that had cheated off me looked pale and sickly, in a state of shock. They knew that I screwed them over. They just didn't know how badly. There was nothing they could say or do. I was one of 3 students that had an A in that class that semester. The average grade was in the low 60s. That low grade for my classmates ended up knocking several kids out of the running for valedictorian several years later. Oddly, I was treated with noticeably more respect after this, and I wasn't cheated off of again, as far as I could tell. Story 5. Winning the race out of spite. I've been watching a lot of r/ on YouTube and only recently realized I've got my own story that would probably fit on this sub. If he sees this, hi r/. I'm autistic, though, we didn't know at the time of the story, so I've always thought differently from most people around me and never really noticed until it was too late and people were already bullying me. I was never inappropriate, but to a bunch of 10-year-olds, liking mice and rats, watching nerdy video game let's plays and drawing characters with colorful hair was criminal enough to make my life hell for several years. My father was a very traditional. Autism was made up by the woke media New Zealand bushman, so as kids me and my little brother were strapped into his giant car and driven down to whatever new hunting competition he could find within 45 minutes of our house. He was relatively well known and even had his own nickname from decades ago. Sounds awesome, but when people know your father as a rough and tough conservative who only wears hunting and fishing brand clothes, people tend to be pretty disappointed when they find out his child is a quiet, polite, animal-adoring nerd who tiptoes through mud like a Victorian royal. So, at this new competition I was more or less hiding from everyone at the trailer they dumped all the brush-tail possums in. I had ended up finding a baby in one of the pouches that had probably starved. Sad face. I decided to dig a small hole in the ground and bury it. I was cradling it in my hands, crouched on the ground, when a group of kids I hadn't seen came up behind me. "Are you Crank's kid?" Yes, that was his nickname and I still don't understand it. Yes. What are you doing? I found a baby possum. I wanted to bury it. The mocking came, with me unable to escape since I had been boxed in by the group. Eventually I ran off and found a different spot next to my little brother. He looked out for me while I buried the baby under a bush and I was satisfied. But the whole day this group belittled and teased me whenever they saw me about how I wasn't tough. It was miserable, but my father wouldn't let me leave or let me sit in the car, so I was stuck. My father signed me and my brother up to do a rabbit race. Didn't even know until they were calling names and he came up behind us, said he signed us up and we were doing it, no arguing. This is where the petty revenge comes in. These races had prizes and I wanted to win something. Even if it meant nothing to me, the weak kid showing everybody up at their own game and winning that envelope of money would make my goddamn day. I knew I probably wouldn't be able to beat their times, but I would try. During a rabbit race, you race individually while being timed by an announcer. You have a rabbit tied to your back, its feet basically wrapped around you like a backpack. It's something hunters just do with most dead animals, really. But for me, I just couldn't do it. Not because of ethics, but because it was so uncomfortable. It wouldn't go around my shoulders right. I couldn't get it on. But I had to race and I wasn't going to embarrass myself. I turned around, asked for the rabbit and cradled it like a baby in my arms. You could see the looks from the crowd already and I hadn't even started yet. The race started and I ran. The announcer was genuinely pretty confused when he noticed that the rabbit wasn't on my back but in my arms against my shoulder. The crowd cheered, awkwardly. Keep in mind I was a short kid with rolls, so I wasn't exactly graceful. So I was ducking under obstacles and went through a ditch all while cuddling up to a rabbit corpse. I finished and I was teased again. I didn't really care though. I'd tried. Even if I really didn't think I would win. But nope. As we were all sitting on the grass in front of this big portable truck with a stage built inside, they called out the first place winner for our age group and there I was. My name, loud and clear. I was smug as hell walking up and absolutely relished the faces of those kids, confused and shocked. I took my little white envelope of cash and strutted my dorky ass back down to the grass and smirked. They actually didn't talk to me after that and I got peace for the 45 or so minutes we waited for our father to let us leave. I didn't get to keep my prize money, unfortunately, sad face. Anything we won at those competitions that our father could use was taken, and that definitely included money. But, my ego could not be deflated, and to this day I am smug as hell about it. That's all for today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.